there is 0% chance of selling him to Barcelona. That is the exact position Atletico Madrid have put on record, and it changes everything about the final week of this transfer window. Julian Alvarez is a player who has made his preference known. He wants Barcelona, Barcelona want him. But the club that actually owns his contract has just drawn a line in the sand, and they have done it publicly, in a statement carried by Fabrizio Romano, using words like dignity and victimization. This is not quiet boardroom tension anymore. This is a club openly saying they feel wronged, openly refusing to bend, and openly putting one suitor out of the running while leaving the door ajar for someone else. That someone else is Arsenal. With 6 days left before the transfer window shuts, the picture around Julian Alvarez has shifted in a way that very few people expected even a week ago. Betting markets have moved. Public comments from an Arsenal legend have added fuel to the fire. And 2 separate transfer stories involving Arsenal's own forward line, Victor Gyökeres and Gabriel Jesus, are now tangled up in how this saga could actually be resolved. This is where we start. Here is what was genuinely at risk for Arsenal in this situation. If Barcelona had secured any kind of agreement with Atletico Madrid, even a soft one, Arsenal's interest in Julian Alvarez would have been finished before it started. Alvarez himself has been clear that Barcelona was his first choice. If that door had stayed open, there would have been no realistic route in for Arsenal at all. The only reason this story has any life for Arsenal fans right now is because Atletico Madrid have shut that Barcelona route down, publicly and firmly, with a statement that leaves almost no room for interpretation. Before we go further, if you want this kind of detailed, fact-based breakdown of every Arsenal story as it develops this week, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I am going through everything confirmed, everything rumoured, and I am going to be clear about which is which the entire way through. Let us get into it properly. The Champions League draw, let us start with something that is fully confirmed and sitting right in front of us. The Champions League draw takes place tomorrow, Thursday, at 5 in the afternoon, UK time. Arsenal supporters have been planning their European travel around this moment, and there is good reason for the excitement. Last season, Arsenal were the only club in the entire competition to go 8 from 8 in the league phase. That perfect record meant they went straight into the last 16 without touching the playoff round. If Arsenal manage anything close to that record again this season, they avoid that extra, more dangerous knockout hurdle once more. Given how agonisingly close this team came in the final in Budapest, there is a real sense inside the fan base that this could be the season it all comes together. Now here is the part that actually affects tomorrow's draw directly. Arsenal sit in pot 1. Alongside them in that top tier are Paris Saint-Germain, Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, Liverpool, Inter Milan, Manchester City, Barcelona, and Atletico Madrid. Arsenal will face 8 different clubs across the wider 36-team league phase. 2 clubs from each of the 4 pots, 1 played at home and 1 played away. As always, Arsenal cannot be drawn against another Premier League club. But this year, there is a new rule in place, and it has a direct and confirmed impact on Arsenal specifically. The new regulation states that no individual fixture can be repeated with the same team playing at home if that exact fixture, both home and away, has already taken place within the last 2 seasons. Arsenal lost 1-0 away at Inter Milan during the 2024-25 season. They then went back to the San Siro in January and won 3-1. Because Arsenal have now played both legs against Inter Milan, 1 loss away and 1 win away. Wait, let me be precise here because this detail matters. Arsenal have played at Inter's ground twice in 2 seasons, and under the new rule, that means Arsenal cannot be drawn to travel to Inter Milan again this season. They could still host Inter Milan at the Emirates, that fixture remains open, but the away trip to the San Siro is off the table for this year's draw. What does that actually mean in practical terms for Arsenal fans hoping to plan a big away trip? It removes what many considered one of the more accessible away days in Pot 1 from the equation. The remaining possible away opponents from Pot 1 are now Paris Saint-Germain, Barcelona, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, and Atletico Madrid. Every single one of those trips carries its own weight, its own history, and its own difficulty. There is no easy option left in that pot for Arsenal's away day. Whichever name comes out of the hat tomorrow, it is going to be a significant fixture. And personally, watching this unfold, there would be something quite fitting about Arsenal being paired away at Barcelona, given everything currently happening off the pitch with Julian Alvarez. That is pure conjecture on my part, but the football romantic in me cannot ignore the coincidence sitting right there. This is confirmed information. The rule is real, it has been reported directly from a source close to the situation, and it narrows Arsenal's possible away trips in Pot 1 to 5 clubs instead of 6. Keep that in your mind as tomorrow's draw approaches. Think about what this actually means for the shape of Arsenal's entire European campaign. Every one of those 5 remaining possible away opponents, Paris Saint-Germain, Barcelona, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, and Atletico Madrid is a club with genuine pedigree at this level. There is no version of tomorrow's draw where Arsenal quietly slip through with a straightforward away trip in pot 1. Whatever name comes out, it will be treated as a marquee fixture, both by supporters planning their travel and by Arteta's coaching staff building the fixture calendar around it. The removal of Inter Milan as an away possibility also means one fewer psychological rematch on the road. Arsenal already have unfinished business with Paris Saint-Germain and with Barcelona from recent European history, so depending on how the pots fall, tomorrow's draw could easily hand Arsenal a fixture list loaded with statement occasions rather than routine away days. That is worth sitting with for a moment because it changes how supporters should think about planning around this season's league phase compared to last season's more varied spread of opponents. The Julian Alvarez situation, point by point now, to the story-dominating conversation around the club this week. Let us build this from the ground up because there are several layers here and I want to separate what is confirmed from what is still speculation. What is confirmed? Julian Alvarez has stated his preference to join Barcelona. Barcelona have been public about wanting to sign him. Their president, Joan Laporta, repeated that stance publicly again on Wednesday, saying Barcelona intend to wait for Alvarez until the very end of the transfer window and that they remain interested in signing him this window. That is Barcelona's confirmed, on the record position as of Wednesday. What is also confirmed is Atletico Madrid's response. Atletico issued a direct statement, reported by Fabrizio Romano and quoted from Marca, addressing the situation head-on. The statement said the player is being portrayed as a victim, but that the real victim of this entire saga is the football club itself. It said the situation has harmed Atletico both economically and socially. It stated, in the clearest possible terms, that there is 0% chance of selling Julian Alvarez to Barcelona, and it repeated that exact line twice for emphasis. The statement went further, framing this as an issue of dignity rather than money, and accused unnamed parties of running a campaign built on lies and half-truths, insisting that Atletico Madrid are the only party paying a price in this saga. That is about as unambiguous as a public transfer statement gets. When a club uses the word dignity and repeats a 0% figure twice in the same statement, they are not leaving themselves room to quietly reverse course in 48 hours. This reads as a club that has genuinely closed the door on one specific suitor. Now, alongside that official statement, there is context worth including, because it explains why Atletico's tone has become this firm. Julian Alvarez was booed by his own supporters during a recent match against Villarreal. That is a significant detail. It tells you the relationship between player and club has visibly deteriorated, not just in boardroom conversations, but out in the open, in front of the crowd. When a World Cup winning forward is being booed off his own pitch, that is not a situation any club wants to let drag on indefinitely. So here is where the logic naturally lands. Atletico have ruled out Barcelona. The player relationship with the fan base is strained. There are only 6 days left before the transfer window closes. If Atletico Madrid want to resolve this before deadline day, and there is every indication they do, a transfer needs to happen quickly. With Barcelona seemingly removed from consideration, Arsenal are now positioned as the most realistic destination, even though, and I want to be completely clear about this part, Julian Alvarez himself has not yet publicly opened the door to a move to Arsenal. That piece of the story remains speculation. He may still hold out hope for Barcelona to find a way through. He may decide, given the current stalemate, that Arsenal represents his best remaining path to regular first-team football at a top-level club. Both of those are live possibilities, and until Alvarez himself signals a shift, that part stays firmly in the rumour category. What does add weight to the Arsenal angle, though, is the movement in public betting markets. According to figures being circulated from Polymarket Sport, Arsenal's implied probability of signing Julian Alvarez has now risen to 32%. For context, Atletico Madrid retaining the player sits at 47%, Barcelona has fallen to 12%, and Chelsea sits at just 3%. Now, I want to be honest with you about what this actually represents. Betting market percentages are not confirmation of a transfer. They reflect where public money and public sentiment currently sit, and they can move sharply within hours based on nothing more than a single tweet or rumour. But directionally, the fact that Arsenal have overtaken Barcelona in these numbers, moving from what was previously seen as a long shot into genuine second favourite position, tells you something real about how the conversation around this deal has shifted in recent days. Treat it as a signal of momentum, not as fact. There has also been public commentary from Thierry Henry on this exact situation, and it is worth including because it captures the broader football world's reaction to how unusual this saga has become. Henry raised the question of whether transfer rules themselves need reviewing, given how rarely a situation like this plays out in public. He pointed out that Atletico Madrid are themselves in the market for a striker, so he questioned the logic of Atletico continuing to block a departure for a player they were already planning to eventually replace. He noted that Barcelona and Atletico have done transfer business together before, referencing the Antoine Griezmann transfer as a precedent, so he questioned why this particular deal has suddenly become impossible. And critically, Henry made the point that at some stage the player himself has to be considered in all of this. He said Julian Alvarez deserves clarity, respect, and the freedom to determine his own future, and he closed by warning that how Atletico Madrid handled this entire situation will stay in people's memory for a long time. That is a significant voice in world football publicly questioning Atletico's approach, and it adds real pressure on the Spanish club to find a resolution quickly, one way or another. There is also a separate report suggesting Alvarez himself may be coming to terms, for what would be the first time, with the idea that Arsenal represents his only realistic path forward. According to that report, Atletico's stance against selling to Barcelona remains completely unyielding, and the crowd's reaction at the Metropolitano Stadium on Sunday has apparently opened a door that, until just a few days ago, appeared firmly shut. I want to flag clearly that this remains a claim from a single outlet rather than something confirmed directly by the player or by Atletico Madrid themselves, so file this under developing rather than confirmed. But it lines up logically with everything else we have covered. If Barcelona is closed and the fan relationship has broken down publicly, Arsenal becoming the path of least resistance is a reasonable conclusion, even if it is not yet a guaranteed outcome. Finally, on this story, there is a genuinely interesting structural detail about how a deal could actually be constructed if it does happen. Arsenal are in the fortunate position of having two forwards who reportedly appeal to Atletico Madrid, Victor Gyökeres and Gabriel Jesus. According to reporting from Miguel Delaney, there is a real possibility that Arsenal could offer Gyökeres, or potentially both forwards, combined with a financial fee, as a way of significantly smoothing any deal for Julian Alvarez. This is speculative in terms of exact structure, no swap arrangement has been confirmed, but it does explain why Arsenal specifically, more than most other suitors, are in a strong position to make an attractive offer. Arsenal have assets that Atletico actually want on top of financial resources, and that combination is exactly the kind of thing that turns a difficult negotiation into an achievable one. There is one more angle worth sitting with before moving on, and it is about timing rather than fact. 6 days is not a long window for a deal of this complexity to come together, especially one that may involve multiple Arsenal players moving to Atletico Madrid as part of the structure. Deals involving player swaps, valuations on multiple assets, and wage negotiations for everyone involved typically take longer to finalise than a straightforward cash transfer. That does not mean it cannot happen. Transfer windows regularly produce exactly this kind of late, complicated breakthrough in the final 72 hours. But it is a genuine reason for measured expectations rather than assuming this is close to being finished. Atletico Madrid's public statement tells us they want resolution. It does not tell us the resolution is imminent or that Arsenal specifically is where it lands. So where does that leave the Alvarez situation as a whole? Confirmed. Atletico Madrid have publicly ruled out selling to Barcelona. Confirmed. Barcelona have said they will wait until the end of the window regardless. Confirmed. There are 6 days left in the transfer market. Rumour, but gaining momentum. Arsenal have become the clear second favourite in public betting markets. Rumour. Alvarez himself has not yet confirmed any willingness to join Arsenal, though reports suggest that resistance may be softening. Speculative but logical. A deal could involve Arsenal forwards moving the other way as make-weights. That is the complete, honest picture as it stands right now. The Gabriel Jesus situation, running in parallel to the Alvarez story, is a separate and connected situation involving Gabriel Jesus. According to reporting from Ekrem Koner, Atletico Madrid are also interested in Jesus, who is currently in the final year of his Arsenal contract, although no formal offer has been made by Atletico at this stage. Separately, and this is the more advanced part of the story, talks between Arsenal and Napoli are described as ongoing, with both clubs having reached a general agreement on the transfer fee. However, there is a real obstacle standing in the way of that specific deal. Gabriel Jesus' salary is reportedly considered too high to fit within Napoli's current budget structure. So while the fee itself is not the sticking point, the wage demands are, and that is the kind of obstacle that can stall or completely collapse a transfer even after the clubs have found common ground on the valuation. Given that Jesus is entering the final year of his contract, Arsenal have a clear incentive to move him on this summer, rather than risk losing him for nothing next year on a free transfer. Whether that exit ends up being to Napoli, assuming the wage issue gets resolved, or potentially becomes part of a different equation involving Atletico Madrid and the Alvarez situation, remains to be seen. Nothing here is confirmed as completed. Both possible destinations are still live negotiations with real obstacles in front of them. Gabriel Martinelli's move to Al-Hilal. This next story is considerably further along than either of the two we have just covered. According to Fabrizio Romano, Gabriel Martinelli's representatives are back in direct contact with Al-Hilal to finalise personal terms and close out the move. Arsenal, for their part, are reportedly ready to authorise Martinelli for a medical once a package worth more than €65 million has been verbally agreed with the Saudi club. Let me be precise about what stage this deal is actually at. A verbal agreement on the fee between the two clubs is a serious advanced step in any transfer. It is not the same as a medical having taken place, and it is not the same as an official announcement, but clubs generally do not authorise a player for a medical unless they consider the deal essentially done in principle. The remaining work appears to be finalising personal terms directly between Martinelli and Al-Hilal, which is typically the final procedural stage before a transfer becomes official. This represents a significant departure from Arsenal's squad, a homegrown attacking talent moving to Saudi Arabia for a fee well in excess of €65 million. For a club managing squad depth and financial planning during a summer already filled with major forward-line business involving Jesus, Gabriel and potentially Alvarez, funds generated from a sale of this size provide meaningful financial flexibility heading into the final days of the window. Nwaneri and the Newcastle loan interest turning to one of Arsenal's academy graduates now. According to reporting from Arsenal Radar, Newcastle have reportedly been given the green light to pursue a loan move for Nwaneri, with Arsenal prioritising a temporary departure for the 19-year-old this summer. The framing around this move matters. Arsenal are reportedly not looking to sell Nwaneri permanently. The stated preference is for him to gain regular first-team football elsewhere on loan, developing further before potentially returning to competition for a place in the senior squad. Newcastle are described as being among the clubs interested, but I want to stress that, as of right now, nothing has actually been agreed between the parties. This is described explicitly as talks that could progress before the September 1st deadline, which is the domestic transfer deadline separate from many European deadlines. This is a story to watch rather than a story to treat as settled. Arsenal's stated intention, keeping Nwaneri within the club long-term while accelerating his development through regular football, is confirmed. The specific destination and the structure of any loan agreement is not yet finalised. Ezri Konsa's comments on Arsenal's standards. Finally, a smaller story, but one that speaks to the internal culture inside the club right now. Ezri Konsa, who joined Arsenal from Aston Villa, has spoken publicly about the difference he has noticed since arriving. He described the level, intensity and standards at Arsenal as something else entirely compared to his time at Aston Villa, and said this was one of the primary reasons he chose to make the move. Konsa specifically credited Mikel Arteta's coaching approach, saying Arteta does not simply issue instructions, but explains every detail behind them, covering positioning, movement, angles and timing, with everything carrying a clear purpose. He described the daily intensity as demanding in a positive sense, saying players leave the pitch exhausted, yet still wanting more, and that the collective standard is high enough that nobody can afford to switch off, even briefly. He was respectful of his time at Aston Villa, but was direct in saying that Arsenal represents a different level entirely, and that this environment is exactly why he made the move, to test himself at the highest level of the game. This kind of internal testimony matters more than it might initially appear. When a new signing speaks this specifically about coaching detail and daily standards, rather than offering generic praise, it tends to reflect something genuinely embedded in how the club now operates under Arteta. For a squad currently going through significant transfer activity in the forward areas, with Martinelli departing, Jesus' future uncertain, and a potential major arrival in Julian Alvarez still developing, having that kind of consistent internal culture and coaching structure in place is exactly the foundation that allows a club to absorb this level of squad change without it destabilising performances on the pitch. Bringing it all together, step back and look at the full picture forming around Arsenal this week. A Champions League draw tomorrow that has already been shaped by a new rule removing one possible away trip from the equation. A genuinely dramatic situation involving Julian Alvarez, where Atletico Madrid have made their position on Barcelona unmistakably clear, where public betting markets and public commentary from figures like Thierry Henry are both pointing toward growing momentum for Arsenal, but where the player himself has not yet confirmed a willingness to make that move. A parallel situation involving Gabriel Jesus, where a fee has been agreed with Napoli but wages remain a genuine obstacle, while Atletico's interest adds another possible path. A near-complete departure for Gabriel Martinelli to Al-Hilal, generating significant funds at exactly the moment Arsenal may need them most. Ongoing conversations about Ethan Nwaneri's development path through a potential loan. And underpinning all of it, a dressing room culture that new signings are describing as operating at a genuinely elite standard. 6 days remain in this transfer window. What happens with Julian Alvarez specifically is going to depend heavily on whether Atletico Madrid can find an agreement that satisfies both their financial demands and their evident desire to resolve this saga before deadline day arrives. Everything we have covered today is either confirmed directly from official statements and credible reporting, or clearly flagged as developing speculation. That distinction matters, and I will keep making it clear every single time a new detail emerges. If this breakdown helped you understand where things genuinely stand, make sure you are subscribed, because the next few days are going to move quickly, and I will be back with the next update as soon as there is something real to report.